Hi, I'm Bess, the moderator. Welcome to our investment panel. I'd like to introduce our panelists. Jing, founding partner of Vectors Angel. Jane started Vectors Angel in 2019 to enable collaboration between like-minded impact-focused companies and investors. She's an investment manager with Goldwine Innovation Capital, a clean tech program manager at UC Berkeley, and president of Energy Innovation Network. She holds a MS from Cornell University on Sustainable Design Studies and MS in Energy System Engineering from University of Toronto. So Jane, I understand your fund invests in seed, pre-A, and even Series A, depending on many factors. Can you share with our audience why you list three most important criteria? Number one is founders and team. Second is impact. Third is exit strategy.
Yeah, so I want to make it very clear that we're not a typical fund. We're angel group that we focus on impact investing. And the two areas we're looking at, first is sustainability, and the second area is healthcare. So when we look at the company, is first we look into the problem they're actually solving. Are they actually having an impact on their sector and a positive impact in the society? So that's number one thing we take a look at. If we don't think that fall into our category, we don't consider them in our investment. And for that reason, we believe our money will be making the most impact at the earlier stage, pre-seed or seed level. Because for Series A, we think angel investors' money does not make as much impact as seed stage or pre-seed anymore. And also angel investors, they were willing to take higher risk, but with a decent return as well. So that's why the number one thing we're looking at, if the company even fit into every category area. And the bigger the impact the company having in one industry, it often means that they're actually solving the problem and the market is big for them. And the second thing we're looking at is really the founder and the team. I think many of our panelists have already talked about the founders, their charisma, the way they get things done are super important. But I do have another perspective I want to share. So I work in UC Berkeley to incubate or accelerate university technology spin out for quite some time. And those technology founders or deep tech founders, sometimes they have no charisma. They're super nerdy and they're not interesting at all. They get into the accelerator incubator program. They're just like having their head on to develop their technology to make it work. Or the thing they're working on, many of them they need to at least validate their technology work in the lab, and then they can move their product from the lab to market. So this type of technology, you're not really expecting 100 times X exit. It doesn't happen. Those companies, however, are pretty good acquisition target for big technology companies. So the return multiples are relatively lower for this type of companies. So when we look at in this kind of B2B technology company, the first thing we're really looking at is who is going to acquire this type of company. And then by doing that, we're obviously calculating the return multiples. And those companies, I think they are really critical to enable a lot of the technology innovations and make it work. I want to just make a quick note about the Nest thermostat acquired by Google for $3.2 billion. It's actually one of the company in our clean tech or sustainability area that we think that's achieving the highest return ever. That's because they're not really considered as a hardware company. They're considered as a software company. as a potential door, like open potential door for Google into smart homes. However, that's the story you hear before they get acquired is like, oh, 6 years they get such a high valuation, bought into Google. But the second half of the story many people don't know is that after they got into Google, they really didn't produce the kind of market traction that Google wanted. So the department got folded into Google hardware. So from the many perspective, I think the acquisition was not as successful as Google hoped, and they overpaid for this company. But again, the company really having high valuation is because they have a software component, but they're using hardware as a way to get into people's store, and they keep on selling software on top of the hardware. Yeah, and as you mentioned, the hardware companies have pretty high risk. So everything's about a risk and reward. You do a calculation. If you think the risk and reward match up, then you invest. If you believe the reward is too low, but the risk is too high, then you pass on the company, or tell them to find like foundation money to support their way. Not everything's venture backable. So we ask the founder to ask himself, what do you want to do with the company? What is the lifestyle you want? Why are you jumping into venture money if you don't have to go to the venture path? Yeah.
Mhm. Well, that's kind of, cover my second question, but I'm going to repeat it, so audience can actually, learn. So out of the few dozen funds I work with, we have the most discipline to focus on designing the startup exit on day one. Most of the founders are so afraid of bringing up the exit strategy to investor on the first meeting. And why would you want them to include it in the fundraising deck and also make it as part of your due diligence? I think these are, things that, it will be very helpful for founders to understand it.
Every single fund do their return calculation. What is the exit strategy for this potential company? It is a thing that every single fund does a calculation. That's what the limited partner for every single fund are looking at. How are you getting me like 30% IRR for the fund return? So you better calculate your exit multiple carefully before you putting money into every single company. The founders one question: what do you want to do with the company? What do you want to do down the road? Do you want to like really go big, or you want to like exit halfway? Or that's all the discussions are willing to listen or hear from the founder, because it's I think the exit timeline is also important. If you exit too early, then the return multiple is sometimes slower. You return later. But if you're like, okay, you're giving up this acquisition opportunity and you wait for a few years, maybe you don't find that kind of like acquisition opportunities anymore. So it's really, case by case. What is the right timing to exit the company? If a founder is telling you I'm exiting the company next year, or the year after, it doesn't really hit the return hurdle that typical VC want. So if the founder just want to exit super early, sometimes it works well for angel investors. To be honest, we take a look at those companies who want to exit early, especially in the medical space. They do get bought out, in a couple of years after they pass FDA. That's kind of the path they take, and you don't have linger angel investors' money forever. But this type of deal may not be super exciting for VCs because you're not getting the super high multiple that your LP want to balance off a portfolio. Yeah, so every single founder need to think about their exit strategy, as it's a part of the homework the VC deal anyway.